So welcome. Good morning, afternoon, and evening to those of you that are joining us from all over the world. Thank you for participating. My name is Larcus Pickett, and I am a program manager with the National Association of Regulatory Utility Commissioners, and I will be the moderator and timekeeper for today's webinar. Today's webinar is a part of a series of webinars run by the International Confederation of Energy Regulators under our Women in Energy initiative. And the goal of today's webinar is to hear various perspectives on the treatment of vulnerable customers, specifically from New York and two countries in sub-Saharan Africa, Nigeria and Tanzania. So we have a great group of panelists with us today. We have Mr. Abba Terab, who is the Senior Manager of Tariffs and Rates with the Nigerian Electricity Regulatory Commission. We also have Ms. Kemi Kafanabo, who is the Principal Financial Analyst from the Energy and Water Utility Regulatory Authority of Tanzania. And finally, we have Ms. LuAnn Scherer, who is the Director of Consumer Services with the New York Public Service Commission. And so the structure of today's panel is we will first hear from Ms. LuAnn, and then we will hear from Ms. Kemi, and then followed by Mr. Abba. And then after that, we will leave a little bit of time for audience questions. So if you have questions, please go ahead and type them into the question box on the right-hand side in your control panel. And then I will ask the questions in order that they are received. So I will go ahead and hand it over to Ms. LuAnn, who will share her experience from New York.
Good morning. First, I'm going to let you all know that it's snowing here in Albany. We've got about 6 inches, so it's been a little messy getting into work, hence we're running a little late. So I'm here to talk about the New York State Affordability Policy, which was implemented or was approved by the Commission in 2016. We have had a strong consumer protections. A law was passed here in New York in 1981. It's called the Home Energy Fair Practices Act. It has very strong consumer protections related to terminations in particular. We could spend a whole day talking about HEFPA, we call it HEFPA, but that's not really the purpose of today's presentation. But I think it's important to have that as a backdrop when we think about the other policies that have been implemented. We also have the New York State Energy NYSERDA, which does the energy efficiency. We have a very strong low-income energy efficiency program, which provides no-cost energy efficiency assistance to low-income families. And third, we have direct assistance programs through the utility. And we've had those for many, many years, and that's really what I'm going to focus on today. So we can turn the page. So prior to the adoption of the Affordability Policy in May of 2016, all low-income households in the state that are served by the 9 major investor-owned utilities received a set monthly discount. And when we talk about low-income households, we basically those are generally customers who receive a federal LIHEAP grant. It's the Low Income Home Energy Assistance Program. So basically in New York, it's a federal program. The states administer the program. In New York, customers who have gas or electric heat generally get a $350 grant annually. They have to apply every year, but they get a $350 grant, which goes directly to the utility. So because the utility knows who gets the grant, those customers whose payment HEAP grant goes directly to the utility are enrolled in the utility low-income discount program. So up until May of 2016, customers who heated with electric heat got a discount between $10 and $27 per month, and that was dependent on the utility they were served by. The gas heat discount ranged from $5 to $50 per month. And these discounts were generally negotiated during rate cases. So that's why there's a lot of inconsistency. Plus, you know, we have consumer advocates throughout the state, and they were required to intervene in every rate court case to try to get more of a discount. So we believed it was time to have a statewide policy, and we worked very hard with the utilities, with the consumer advocates, with many parties to come up with this, what the PSC adopted in 2016, which generally allows low-income customers to have an energy burden of only 6% of their household income, and we targeted 2.3 million low-income customers in the state. Why 6%? Well, 6% was widely accepted, or it's widely accepted that shelter costs should not exceed 30% of income, and a number of states targeted 6%, including New Jersey and Ohio, although they do it a little different than we do it. So we decided on a 6% energy burden. Next page. So the way it's structured, because we know a customer gets a HEAP grant, we know what their income level is. So we know for a certain size household what their income level is, and basically what we want to do is we know what the average energy bill for a household is based on the utility. We want to bring their energy bill down to a 6%. So it's really math. We have a tiered discount program because the HEAP benefit, there's a regular HEAP benefit, and then there are tier 2 and tier 3 benefits, which are customers who get one or more supplemental benefits. So HEAP gives a supplemental benefit for the poorest households, and they give a supplemental benefit for the most vulnerable households. So tier 2 and tier 3 customers generally receive a higher discount. There are some customers who had been receiving the discount that no longer need the discount to achieve the 6% energy burden, so they are still getting a $3 monthly minimum benefit. The other requirement of there are a number of requirements of the Energy Affordability Policy, but one of the requirements is participants are encouraged to be on budget billing or levelized billing, which means their bill is the same 12 months of the year. We encourage that because we don't want a month to come where the customer's energy bill is actually higher than their discount. Okay, next page. There were a number of goals when we were designing the program. The number one goal is we wanted it to be easy. We wanted enrollment to be automatic. So again, the Office of Temporary Disability and Assistance, which is a New York State agency, they oversee the LIHEAP program for the state. They know who gets the regular benefit. They know who gets the tier 2 and tier 3 benefits. So there's a match, basically. So basically, OTDA provides the utilities with the list of customers who are getting each of the 3 benefits so that the customers can be automatically enrolled. And I believe they do this, they provide us data twice a year. In addition, we're working with other sister agencies to enroll customers who don't currently receive a benefit for electric or gas heat. So these are customers that maybe heat with propane or wood or coal or some other deliverable fuel for which the utility doesn't get the grant or doesn't get the grant automatically. So if those customers can somehow be identified, we can provide them the tier 1 discount that the regular HEAP recipients are getting. So we're achieving that through this match too, with the OTDA. So at this point, the utilities are allowing customers who can prove that they're getting the benefit to be enrolled. But at some point in the very near future, we're hoping that that the OTDA, the utilities and OTDA will be able to work closely together to make sure every low-income New Yorker is receiving a benefit. It's a little bit different in the downstate. Con Edison and National Grid, they supply gas and electricity to the very urban areas around New York City, where not every customer pays for their own heat. Many customers live in multifamily buildings. So for those service territories, there's a file match with their OTDA counterpart, but there's a couple of other programs that customers are allowed to participate in to be automatically enrolled. So at this point, we expect shortly there'll be 1.65 million customers enrolled, and hopefully at some point in the near future, we will enroll all 2.3 million households. Next slide. So the Enhanced Low-Income Program costs approximately $260 million statewide, which is twice as what the previous program cost. So what we did was we required that, the commission required that the program cannot cost ratepayers more than 2% of total electric or gas revenues for sales to end-use customers. And none of the utilities at this point have exceeded the 2%. At some point, National Fuel Gas and Niagara Mohawk Gas are bumping up against the 2%. And when it does get to the 2%, we're going to have to adjust the discount levels. And as far as who pays for the discount program, all classes of customers are paying. So it's not just low-income customers paying. Basically, all customers, industrial, commercial, they're all paying for the low-income discount program. Next page. So one of the things in the prior program, some of the utilities had arrears forgiveness programs, which allowed for a customer to be enrolled in a program, and if they stayed current on their bill and actually paid some of the past due balances, much of their arrears would be forgiven. The new program, the utilities have the ability to maintain those programs so long as it doesn't bump up against the 2% energy or the 2% revenue cap. We also required expanded program reporting formats, and when a customer receives emergency HEAP, which previously hadn't been considered, we allow customers who receive emergency HEAP only to be enrolled in the low-income program. And that's it for my presentation. I'll be available for questions after everybody presents. Thank you.
Great. Thank you, LuAnn. We'll go ahead and transition over to Kemi. And just give us 1 second to pull up her presentation. Okay. Kemi, you can go ahead and get started.
Hello, everyone. My name is Kemi Kafanabo. As introduced earlier, I'm the Principal Financial Analyst at the Energy and Water Utilities Regulatory Authority. I'm here to present how we consider the low-income electricity customers where in tariff setting, and particularly for the energy charges and service line connection charges. Now, in setting tariffs, we are actually guided by the Electricity Act of Tanzania, which in the tariff section, we are supposed to set tariffs that you consider each customer according to the cost that they impose in the system. So we are not supposed to cross-subsidize between customer groups. But considering that we have a big population of low-income customers, particularly in rural areas, the household customers were divided into two categories based on their consumption levels. So we have the low usage tariffs for customers who consume less than 75 kilowatt hours per month, and those who consume more than 75 kilowatt hours per month. So currently, as you may see on your screens, the low usage tariff is 100 Tanzanian shillings per kilowatt hour, which is about 34% less than the general usage tariff, which is the T1 customer category group. For a low usage customer, for the first 75 units that they consume in a month, they only pay 100 shillings. But other household customers, from the first units, they'll pay 292 shillings. But then for any usage above 75 kilowatt hours, the household customer who is in the low usage category will end up paying more than what a general usage customer would pay, which is 350 shillings per kilowatt hour. Prior to 2016, they also enjoyed not paying a service charge, which was a monthly charge, whether you were consuming any electricity or not. But from 2016, all household customers, as well as low industrial customers and commercial customers, do not pay a service charge for the usage of electricity. Now, this, you may ask why the 75 kilowatt hours and not something else. Prior to 2014, actually, the low usage customers were considered to consume 50 units per month. But then there were concerns that the units were low, so the regulator decided to increase the usage to 75 kilowatt hours per month. But then, if it happens that a low usage customer ends up using more than 75 kilowatt hours for 3 months consecutively, the utility would transfer such a customer to the general usage tariff. So customers who are in the low usage tariff are supposed to make sure that they actually only use up to 75 kilowatt hours to be able to remain in that group. And we measure consumption because different from what was said by LuAnn, in Tanzania, there is no mechanism of knowing who is a low income person or who is a medium, or who is a high income customer. And for that reason, we had to opt in limiting consumption to be able to identify the low income customers. So you may find even some customers who are in the low usage tariff category who are not low income, but when it happens that they consume more than the units that was planned for the low usage customers, then they'll end up consuming. They'll pay first more for the first 3 months, where as earlier said, it is 350 shillings, as opposed to the 292 shillings that a general usage customer would pay. And if it happens after 3 months that they appear to be consuming more than 75 kilowatt hours per month, then they will have to be transferred to the other category. Now, this mechanism does come with a challenge, because in Tanzania we use prepaid meters to measure the usage of electricity. So we don't have the conventional meters in most cases. We used to have them, and now we have transferred to the prepaid meters. There's still a few people who still have the conventional meters. Now, with a prepaid meter, it's a challenge to measure consumption. As a result, what the utility does is they monitor the purchases of a customer. So in a month, what a customer has to do in order to be able to remain in such a low usage tariff category is purchase up to 75 kilowatt hours. The minute they purchase more than that, that's when they will end up being recognized as a general usage customer after 3 months. Another challenge that we are actually facing with this mechanism is some people are limiting themselves to usage of electricity. You may find somebody actually switching off their refrigerator during the day and switch it on during the night, just so that they actually limit their consumption, while they are actually medium or high income earners. So to address that, we are actually looking at reducing those units once again from 75, going back probably to 50 or even lower than that. Because we have also tracked the purchases of some of the customers, and you may find that a customer, because during the first installation, the prepaid meter is loaded with 50 initial units, which are kind of loaned to the customer. After those units have been exhausted, when a customer goes to make the first purchase, then that's when they pay for the first units and the extra units now that they need. Now, it has happened that we've noted some people are taking up to 6 months before they make their first purchase, meaning that those 50 units are spent for the 6 months. So it appears that those 50 units are too much. And considering that most of the low-income customers that are being targeted for this may have about three lights, maybe a radio and a TV, and possibly that's why the usage is such low. And they would even limit that they would switch on the lights between 7 in the evening up to 10, and then all lights are switched off. So for the next tariff case that we're going to look at, we'll probably reduce these units so as to actually, so that the tariff is is paid by those who are actually targeted. Now, I'll go to the connection charges. Now, for connection charges, we have urban rates and rural rates. Most of the low-income customers, as I said before, are located in the rural areas. So they actually benefit by getting a lower connection charge. As seen in the on the slide, these charges are about 51. It's only 51% of what an urban customer would pay to get a connection. Now, the limitation here is that a customer who is going to receive such a low charge in the rural area is the person who is connected to the low voltage line called the single phase line, because one can get connected on a single phase or a 3-phase. So to be able to enjoy the low connection charges, one has to be in a rural area, and secondly, the connection will only be on a single phase line. Go to the next slide. Next slide, please. Now, if you look at the second table here, you find for the urban and rural areas, as long as you're connected to the 3-phase line, the charge is exactly the same. So, as another way of assisting low-income customers, their connection charges are lower in rural areas when you compare the connection charges to urban areas, and the connection has to be through a single phase line. Another program that is available in the country is through the Rural Electrification Program. The country is trying to increase access to electricity, and it was found that in the rural areas, people are not able to afford much, paying for the connection charges. So there is a Rural Electrification Agency that has taken up the role of electrifying rural areas. Funding for that agency is through government, through the government budget, development partners, and all customers, all electricity customers pay a 3% on their energy bill, energy purchases. So the tariffs that we looked at earlier, those are exclusive of any charges or any tax. Now, on top of those charges, each customer would pay 3% of the charge in their customer category as a contribution to this Rural Electrification Agency. And all these funds are being used to electrify rural areas. And there's a program, there's a plan for electrification. So it's known that which village that will be electrified in a given period of time. Although in some cases they've tried not to disclose such the program, because people end up knowing that, oh, my village is not going to be electrified until the next 2 years or so, and it becomes a political issue. Now, for those who get connected through the Rural Electrification Agency, do not pay for the connection charges. As shown earlier, in the rural areas, for those who are within a 30-meter distance from for connection, they pay about 150 shillings for the connection. Now, what would the customers in the rural areas would pay if they're connected through the agency is only the VAT, which is 18%. So they pay 27,000 shillings only for tax purposes, because the tax authority did not allow a tax-free transaction for connection charges. So what the customer would pay is only the VAT. And I think that will be the end of my presentation, and I'll wait for questions later. Thank you.
Great. Thank you, Kemi. Just give us 1 second while we pull up Abba's presentation. Okay, Abba, you can go ahead and get started.
All right, thank you very much. Thank you for attending this webinar. And I will say good morning, afternoon, and evening. At least here we're not having challenges of snow, and the weather is quite mild, not as hot as it was most of the time. So we have a lot of tariff policies to help underprivileged customers in Nigeria. And the source of that authority we're deriving is from the Electric Power Sector Reform Act 2005, which has clearly stated some objectives in terms of how to deal with vulnerable customers and then how best to allow them. So the policy thrusts includes to develop procedures for assisting customers who have difficulty in paying their bills. And like mentioned by Kemi, also in Nigeria, we have quite a number of customers that have very low income. And most times that low income also keeps them out of the society, so not connecting with the society very well. So you need to also create avenues for them to have information on how best to assist them. Most times, even if these opportunities are there, some of them don't know how to access, so you need to create the necessary procedures to assist the vulnerable customers. Secondly, of course, to subsidize underprivileged electricity consumers as specified by the minister. Under the Electricity Act, the minister from time to time will determine what class of customers do require subsidy or should be subsidized, or additional subsidies as may arise from time to time. Then, of course, support access to rural customers. Currently, nearly 60% of the population is connected to the national grid, while the remaining 40%, mostly in rural areas, are not connected to the national grid, and they have some isolated electricity networks, mostly supported by states and local governments at the regions, which are very expensive, and they run for certain hours, like 6 hours in a day or something like that. So there's also need by the Act to improve more access for people either to be connected to the grid or have alternative sources of electricity, mostly through renewables. Then, of course, part of the dilemma for us as the regulator, we are also been mandated to phase out or substantially reduce cross-subsidy in the system. Nigeria is currently going through the reform process, although the reform process started as early as 2005, 2006, after the enactment of the Electricity Act. However, because moving or rebalancing tariffs from formerly being completely under government ownership and moving through private ownership and trying to make tariffs to be cost reflective. There is an emphasis on how to reduce that, or else the other industrial and commercial customers may not be very, their businesses may be threatened, because if they keep cross-subsidizing others that are underpaying the full cost of the tariff. Please, next slide. Yes, so to achieve these objectives, currently we are in line with the Act. There is the Power Consumer Assistance Fund and the Rural Electrification Fund, which were clearly provided, and how it will be funded in the by the customers, government, and licensees. But however, because of some of the challenges which we will come to, currently the main strategy we're using is a lifeline tariff, which is at about 0.013 cents, just about 1 cent or something like that per kilowatt hour. And the eligibility criteria is for a maximum consumption of less than or equals to 50 kilowatt hours a month. And it's currently mostly funded through cross subsidies and also government funding to support the subsidy. It's assumed that mostly customers that consume this amount of kilowatt hours in a month are mostly in the rural areas, and also mostly underprivileged and need support either by the government or through the cross subsidy. So that's the dilemma, is how do we reduce the cross subsidies and maybe move more and more to government, because the other customer classes that are not benefiting from this subsidy will have to bear the cost. And we have nearly about 3 to 5% of the population that are benefiting from this, which is quite huge, and is also affecting the operations of the utilities. Secondly is the Power Consumers Assistance Fund, which the Act clearly provides that should take care of underprivileged consumers. The challenge is how do we determine underprivileged consumers, which currently the issue of database on income or age or any other demographics to use to determine is always a challenge. So we are undergoing through a consultation process to determine who and who will belong and how this will be funded. Of course, the Act clearly states that it will be funded by government subsidies and eligible customers and also the licensees. Then thirdly, we have the Rural Electrification Fund, which mainly is to assist rural customers to provide access and also alternative source of electricity supply if they cannot be connected to the national grid, mainly currently done through government subsidies, but eventually eligible customers will also help in funding this this strategy for rural electrification. So next slide, please. Yeah, like I mentioned, even though the Electricity Act has provided that we should use the Power Consumer Assistance Fund and the Rural Electrification Fund mainly, however, due to the challenge of reliable data, we are currently mainly using the Lifeline tariff at the rate provided, and mainly using cross subsidies, and depending on government budgets where we have additional support from government, it will also help in subsidizing the Lifeline customers, which we believe to be underprivileged. Also, one of the other challenges we may face is the issue of meter infrastructure. Currently, only about 50 to 55% of the customers are fully metered. So it's only when you are metered that you can basically benefit from this group, and most of them are and the cost of metering is quite a lot, and the utilities are struggling to say, okay, fine, we can charge this amount, but metering them costs quite a lot. So it's a dilemma we're struggling, and we're seeking there have been a lot of interventions that the government has intervened to provide meters to this group of customers mainly, and all residential customers. And hopefully with time, as the costs is being rebalanced and the tariff is made cost reflective, the utilities will have enough resources to roll out the metering program. Then also one of the other challenge for us here, due to the reforms we are undergoing formally under government, there have been a lot of legacy liabilities and inefficiencies that have been built into the system, which has artificially made the electricity cost of serving customers very expensive. And then together with that, if you want to cross-subsidize that, then the other customers that are cross-subsidizing the lifeline customers will be trying to compare, is it still economical for them to stay on the grid or to do private arrangements to get electricity for themselves. So we need to be balancing this. In addition to this, we have these new demands of the technology going renewables and the costs associated with it, especially with government adopting policy targets for having renewable supply through the grid, and which you have to allow for feed-in tariffs at a much higher rate than the conventional technologies of hydropower plants and OCGT power plants. So all this also push the cost, which makes it more difficult for us to cross-subsidize further. And one of the challenges, especially with the absence of metering, ensuring revenue neutrality is very difficult. So some of these customers are based on estimates, and estimates cannot be that reliable. So it's a challenge, but hopefully we are going to overcome it soonest. Next slide, please. Yeah. So overall, the tariff focus that we adopt is geared towards cost reduction and efficiency improving measures, because overall, if the system costs are reduced and efficiencies are gained, not only that other customers, the lifeline customers and underprivileged customers also benefit from the lower cost, and of course, which government will also benefit from having lower amounts to subsidize, if at all these subsidies can be sustained. Then also collaborating with customers on energy efficiency and demand side management, because if the customer's lifeline tariff, just like in the case of Tanzania, if consistently they consume above the 50 kilowatt hours in a month for 3 months, they will be pushed to the next tariff class. So, and once they are pushed to the next tariff class, there will be a huge tariff shock, which might be very difficult for them to bear. So the best thing is, as maybe their income is improving a little, then they have to invest on energy efficiency measures and demand side management, so that they can reduce and stay within the band to continue to benefit from this. While also, in addition, there's a requirement for tariff affordability study for the regulator to carry out a tariff affordability study when conducting any major review of the tariffs, to consider and see what level of amounts customers can bear, and then see what amount of subsidy we can apply for government to take care of this underprivileged customers. Then, of course, improved customer access to information on tariffs and utility. At least if customers are more informed and aware of the tariffs and the services they expect from utilities, it will be more engaging and customers will be more satisfied. Hold the government accountable on why is cross-subsidizing, or what is the benefit of cross-subsidizing. At least those debates are good even for us in coming up with new regulations going forward. Then consultation with customers in setting tariffs, as well as setting service delivery standards. So depending on how good or excellent the service delivery standard you want, of course, there's a corresponding cost with that. So quite a lot of the customers want smart meters or prepaid meters. Then of course the cost is much higher than a credit meter that will only will be read by the utility customer, the utility billing agents. So these are things that we always have to consider, then discuss in an open way, and let the customers are fully engaged, then they can appreciate and say, okay, fine, maybe this level of subsidy is enough or not enough, or this level of standard is too expensive. Let's have a lower standard that we can afford. So I think this part of the overall things we do. So I think that's about the end of my talk, but I am available for all the questions. Thank you very much for your time.
Great. Thank you so much, Abba. So we'll go ahead and take a few questions from the audience. Again, if you have questions, feel free to type them into the comment box on the right. We do have a couple questions, one from Maya, and the question is, who issues grants, and what is the criteria for choosing vulnerable customers? Is it based on number of children, income, assets, daily consumption, or living areas? I think that's a general question for all panelists. Would anyone like to respond to that one?
Yeah, I can. Like I just mentioned, yeah, it's always difficult getting a criteria, and especially if you now start going to the debate of income distribution or redistribution. So for us, with the lack of database, so we focus on only consumption, which is 50 kilowatt hours a month. So we believe customers that consume less than 50 kilowatt hours in a month fall under the category of either low income customers or underprivileged or vulnerable customers. And then hopefully, if as we have enough data on income and enough data on reliable data on income and other things, then we can now see how best to now key in other aspects of the demographics, whether it's about aging population or about rural areas only. Of course, rural areas are mostly considered as that. So, but basically for us is the units of consumption. Like in while I was reviewing some of the tariff program for Rwanda, I saw that for their first tariff block is actually consuming 15 kilowatt hours. So the debate Kemi and their group are having in Tanzania, we've had that. So because we were also thinking, oh, is 50 maybe too small for us to increase? Or so once we saw that one of Rwanda as 15, we said, okay, then that's ours should be okay, or just about right. So that's my comment. I don't know, maybe others have other comments. Thank you.
Great, thank you, Abba. Did anyone else want to comment?
So I can just, this is LuAnn, Scherer. You know, it's a little bit easier here because we have the New York State Office of Temporary Disability, we call it OTDA. They administer the LIHEAP program for the federal government, and our low-income customers are automatically enrolled in the utility programs. So it's based on the receipt of a HEAP grant, and those grants are based on income and household size.
Okay, thank you, LuAnn. So we have time for just 2 more questions. This question is from Suzanne, and it's for LuAnn. The question is there any data available about the arrears forgiveness program you've referred to, and particularly any data concerning whether the forgiveness of debt resulted in any change in payment patterns?
So I'm sure there's data available. I don't have it myself. I think what anecdotally we know is it benefits, most people don't successfully complete the program. I think a small percentage of the people successfully complete the program, which means they pay their current charges, the amount of arrears they're responsible for, and at the end of a certain period, which is 12 months generally, or 24 months, their arrears are forgiven. I can, if you want to provide me your contact information, I can see what's available, if anything.
Great. Thank you. So Suzanne, if you have any, you can go ahead and email us, and we'll get in contact with LuAnn. So our last question is from Una. She's in Europe, and the question is, Europe is mostly affluent customers who can afford to invest in energy efficiency measures. What lessons from the developing world are there so that vulnerable customers too can benefit from energy efficiency. So that question is for Abba and Kemi.
Yeah, it's. I think there are two things. The case of Europe, because of the weather there, it might be difficult to encourage someone to do energy efficiency when it's very cold outside there. So you must have to somewhere to heat up and remain safe in terms of health-wise. So for us here, at least that is slightly not a major challenge. So at least mostly you can limit the consumption to what on a need-based basis, and mostly at night, maybe for doing homeworks for kids and for doing some essential services, and then make sure if there's a proper meter infrastructure that people will shut down their turn off the lights during the daytime and don't waste. And of course, like for us, there have been some enforcement by the standard organizations in Nigeria in terms of importation or production of equipments like household equipment that are not very energy efficient. So at least there's significant progress in that level. So for refrigerators, for televisions and air conditioners, mostly are now have good efficiency levels. So at least that has helped in minimizing consumption. And I think one of the most important key or tool that helps in demand side management is having a prepaid meter. So once customers have to go and vend for the units of electricity, they can monitor their consumption. So if after 2 days, if a number of units have gone, they'll say, okay, the next following days, I'll make sure I reduce this and off this and use less of this and less of that. So I think gradually it will be an economic or natural economic decision for households that are here. Once they have a prepaid meter, it's easier. So even now, for those customers that have prepaid meters, you can see very good response, while those that don't have meters are unestimated. There's no any impetus for them to reduce consumption, rather because they will always pay a flat rate. So I think that's just it. Maybe Kemi will have more to say. Thank you.
Thank you, Abba. Kemi, did you want to? Go ahead. Sorry.
As Abba has mentioned, for us, it's for people to get electricity is just considered to be an improvement of life and not like a necessity, especially considering weather conditions. So it's now, since it's for improvement of life, and partly it's also used as a for security reasons, to make sure that there's light during the night. So they're encouraged actually to have at least one light outside to light up the compound. But there are programs to encourage customers to use the LED light bulbs. They are considered to be expensive, but nowadays the costs have come down. I'm not sure why. There were talks of not having tax on such items because most of them are being imported in Tanzania. But as they are given the advantages of using LED bulbs and the lifespan of the light and how much they'll be able actually to save by using such lights, although the initial cost is considered to be high, they're actually turning to such bulbs in order to consume less energy, and possibly that's why the consumption is also going down for most cases, such that one would use 50 kilowatt hours for 6 months or so.
Great, thank you, Kemi. So it looks like we are actually out of time. I know that there were a few more questions that people So if you'd still like to ask your question, you can go ahead and email the conference organizers, and we'll get you whatever information that you need. But I would like to close by saying thank you all very much to our speakers for everything that you've shared with us today and everything that you've taught us. We have a lot to think about going forward. And I'd like to close by taking a moment to encourage each of the attendees and participants, both men and women, to become engaged in the work of women in energy. So we ask that you please review our website via the ICER website to see the activities that are being offered. And we encourage women regulators to write their stories for the ICER publication. We have also annual mentoring pairings. We offer webinars, we offer social media. And so there are plenty of opportunities to engage with your peers from around the world and to learn from each other. And so we'd also like to have an idea for a future webinar. So if you have any thoughts on that, please let us know. So thank you all very much, and have a wonderful day. Thanks.
Thank you.